Ever wonder how billionaires almost never lose their shirts? Even when one of their companies goes totally belly up or gets hit with a massive lawsuit? Well, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on extreme wealth preservation. We're going to unpack the exact mechanics of how the ultra-wealthy structure their assets to last for generations. Drawing straight from our source material, we'll walk through the high-level blueprint for corporate structuring, literally building a private family empire step by step, from the ground up.
So let's dive into the ultimate question of legacy, right? How exactly do you construct a sprawling business empire that survives, thrives, and fiercely protects what's yours? Look, making your first million is all about playing offense. You need risk, you need hustle, you gotta time the market. But keeping that wealth intact for 100 years, that is purely about uncrackable defense. It's not just about making money, it's about structuring it so it becomes bulletproof against market crashes, lawsuits, and, frankly, family drama. We aren't just talking about a successful business here. We're talking about building a fortress. Okay, here's our master blueprint for today's explainer. First up, the foundational trust structure. Second, segmenting by industrial sector. Third, separating church and state. Fourth, building an internal bank. And finally, optimizing for the exit. Let's get right into it. Step 1, the foundational trust structure. Basically pouring the concrete. Our source material shows that a true empire always starts by locking down your wealth with either an irrevocable spendthrift trust or a dedicated family office. Now let's cut through that legal jargon for a second. Why irrevocable? Well, it means exactly what it sounds like. Once it's set, you, the creator, can't just undo it or yank the money back out on a whim. And because you legally don't have direct access to those assets anymore, guess what? Neither do your creditors. If you get sued personally, that money is lacked tight in a legal vault. And the spendthrift part? That's basically an anti-mega-yacht clause. It protects the beneficiaries, say your kids or grandkids, from their own bad decisions. They get a steady drip of income, sure, but they absolutely cannot blow the principal on a terrible investment. By placing the core ownership right here, you're pouring the uncrackable concrete that shields the whole empire from outside attacks and inside mistakes. Step 2, segmenting by industrial sector, or as I like to think of it, putting up the load-bearing pillars. Once you start scaling, you've got to organize the sheer chaos of owning dozens of different businesses. You do this by grouping them into highly specific sub-holding companies based on their industry, like SaaS, healthcare, or logistics. Let's imagine a scenario. Say you own a massive medical device company and a super fast-growing software startup. You absolutely do not want those tangled together in a messy web. Instead, you create clean, load-bearing pillars. That way, if the software company tanks or gets slapped with a massive copyright lawsuit, the damage is 100% contained to the SaaS pillar. Because of this modular design, the failure doesn't drag down your healthcare or logistics assets. They stay completely untouched. Every time you buy a new business, it just slots right into its designated sector. All right, step 3, separating church and state, putting up those internal walls and floors. This is where things get really clever. You must legally split your empire into 2 distinct sides. Op-Cos, which handle the daily operations, and Prop-Cos, which hold the actual property and real estate. This distinction is absolutely crucial. Imagine a delivery driver for your logistics Op-Co gets into a terrible accident. The operational company could face a company-ending lawsuit. But, and this is the key, because a totally separate Prop-Co actually holds the deed to your multi-million-dollar warehouse and your fleet of trucks, those physical assets are legally isolated from the operational fallout. You never, ever want the companies signing vendor contracts and taking on daily liability to be the exact same company that owns your expensive hard assets. And here is how you make that structure work for you. By owning your own infrastructure. The Prop-Co buys the warehouses and offices and then smartly leases them right back to your operational companies at the going market rate. It's brilliant. It lets the family quietly extract cash from the risky operational side via rent payments and safely move it over to the ultra-secure property side. The money just moves from your left pocket to your right pocket, keeping it all in the family while legally shielding the assets. It's literally the perfect way to generate internal revenue while maximizing protection against all those day-to-day business risks we just talked about. Moving on to step 4, building an internal bank, the plumbing of the empire. Every massive structure needs good plumbing. And here, that flow is cash. You build an internal bank by setting up a dedicated FinCo, a finance company, to issue debt and lend money between your subsidiaries. Our source points out that this FinCo becomes the beating heart of your capital.
Instead of begging an outside commercial bank for a loan, one highly profitable pillar of your empire can fund a newer, growing pillar. But listen closely because this is critical. You absolutely must use compliant market rate interest for these internal loans. Actually, it's more of a strict rule. If you just shuffle money around for free, regulators will pierce the corporate veil. They'll look at it and say, yeah, this isn't a bunch of protected companies. It's just one big, messy slush fund. And boom, you lose all your legal protections. To get the protections of a bank, you have to act like one. Finally, step 5, optimizing for the exit. Putting the roof on. The ultimate payoff of this entire architecture really comes down to one massive strategic advantage. Because of your careful segmentation, you can cleanly detach and sell just one sector to Wall Street without disrupting the rest of your empire. Wall Street buyers absolutely love clean assets. Since you built modular pillars and completely separated your operations from your real estate, you are perfectly positioned for a huge payday. Let's say private equity is throwing crazy money at software companies right now. You can just unscrew your SaaS subholding company and sell it for a massive multiple. You don't have to untangle some nightmare web of shared real estate or internal loans. Your healthcare and logistics pillars won't even feel a breeze. It is modular wealth creation at its absolute finest.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a fascinating little thought experiment. If you took this exact blueprint, organizing your passions and businesses into perfectly segmented pillars to build your own private family empire, which piece would you eventually cash out on, and what would you hold on to forever? The blueprint is right there for the taking.